If you have rotten joists, this is the time to replace rotten joists. So what we did in this case was we took joists, so we had a 10-foot span between our existing beams. So we took 10-foot beam, 10-foot joists, they were 2x8s, and then put them up into the cavity. Now when you put them up in the cavity, they're only going to sit at an angle. You can't get them all the way in. So what we did is just took a sledgehammer and then hammered one end in all the way down, sort of like, and then just, snuck it in. Now, if it's absolutely too tight to do that in your particular case, then you can set up another temporary beam in the same way where you have the post, not a beam, you have a temporary post, and instead of setting a beam underneath the joists, just do a long like 4x6 or 4x8 or something and stick it underneath the joists themselves on the opposite side of the joist where you want to put in your new sister joist, and then jack it up from underneath until you get like a 1/4 inch, and then slam in your joist with your sledgehammer. And then you use ring shank or screws. I like to use screws and nails, a couple of screws just to hold it in place, and then nails across the sister joist. Now, if that sister joist goes from beam to beam, it's not really critical whether those nails are super close or not. Always try to go the full length with your sister joist when you're sistering up to rotten joists. But if you can't and you have to do a shorter length, I would really recommend that you don't go any shorter than like 4 feet, if at all possible, and try to get the longest length that you can. And when you get that long length, it's critical that you really make a patch of nails at the far end away from the rotten point, because it's going to want to pivot. It's going to want to push that side down. So I would do like 10 nails, ring shank nails, on the far end away from the rotten end of the joist. And don't put those nails too close to each other. Like put them 2 inches apart, or 1.5 inches. 1.5 inches apart is good. And just make a big block of nails. And that, when you're nailing them in, you try to stay off of the grain. So you try not to make a nail line on the grain, because that'll split the wood. So you try to put your nails on different parts of the grain so they won't split. And then when that force tries to push the house, it'll try to push your sister off. It'll hit that block that you've created. And then do like a 45-degree pattern of nails every 8 inches or so across the beam going back to the rotten part. Another thing that's kind of important if you're dealing with an older house. So this house is 100 years old, and they used full dimensional lumber when they built this house. So, when you're getting 2x8s, if you've got, one of this old house, that 2x8 may be actually full 2 inches by 8 inches. Whereas you go to the lumber yard, it's going to be 1.5 inches by 7.5 inches. So if that's the case, you can either rip down 2x10s, or you can shim up the 2x8s. And I think either one is going to be fine, as long as you're securing everything properly together.